my sponsor said this to me, very bright and early. If you put as much energy into recovery as you did when you were in active addiction, then you'll be just fine. And so that stuck with me, and I just went with it. I'd go to like 2-3 meetings a day when I could, and I would listen to you guys, and I would listen to Mark's Recovered Cast, and slowly but surely, everything started coming together.
I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. Happy New Year, everybody. It's 2023. We got this thing started in late 2020, so I guess if my math's correct, and I got into the business that I did originally because I didn't need to do math, this is the fourth year that we're on this podcast. John, you're looking at me really strange. 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. So year four.
We started in November
2020.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, so it's 2 years. Yeah, two.
Matt posted his story at the end of November in 2020, if I recall correctly.
Absolutely did. So you're hearing the voice of our guest today, Peter L. Hey, I just want to welcome everybody who's listening to the show. I'm hopeful we have a new audience. People are trying a dry January. If you're thinking about dry January, great time to start this. There's a dry January app, which I highly recommend. It is a great way. It's called Try Dry. It is a great way to take a look and see, hey, can I do this? And there are lots of tools out there. So a great time for New Year's resolution, and a great time to have a guest who's here to tell his story. Peter L. is here. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me. It's an honor. I've listened to you guys ever since I first got sober in December of 2020. And you guys have been a part of me and a part of my journey since day one.
That's humbling to me because when we do this, it's as though the three of us are just talking to each other. And sometimes it's like, are we even connecting with anybody? And it still blows my mind when I hear that.
John and I have a side conversation whether Matt ever publishes these or not. Like, hey, you wouldn't think he does anything with that? So it's good to hear.
So he does his part. Yeah, if I recall correctly, the first podcast you guys had, Matt told his story. And, there's a part of it that stuck with me. And he said something along the lines, I'm not going to quote him verbatim, but it was something along the lines is like, we want to bring something that, to recovery that you can tuck in your pocket and take with you.
Sounds like something I'd say. That's exactly the purpose.
Yeah. And it stuck with me because, when I first got sober, not that I knew like the path that I was about to take, I was a Zoom baby, and so yes, I was able to go to meetings, and I was able to go to meetings, virtually, and as many as I wanted to, but I was kind of yearning for a little bit more. And so when I was working and, just in my spare time, when I was just, trying to figure out sobriety, I was able to listen to you guys and really relate to that. You guys in what was Mark's Recovered Cast were a huge part of me.
Oh, Mark's cast is great. He's like, we're at 105, and I think he's at like 1,300. He's one of the first people ever to do this.
Yeah, and I mean, there's quite a bit of them out there, but
yeah,
a lot as far as anything substance related that I can relate to, you guys and Mark have really just held a place in my heart, and I appreciate you guys doing this, and I know there's a lot of other people out there that feel the same way.
What is really great about recovery podcasting now? So when I got sober back in 2014, the only thing I could really find that had any substance was Mark's podcast. Now, if you're female, if you're not part of AA, depending on whatever demographic, you could be female, I'm not into AA, I consider myself alcohol use disorder, you can find somebody who's going to speak to that. If you are in AA and want an AA-based thing, you can find something for that, and everywhere in between. I think that's the beauty of this. I will say I'm always in awe of people who are the Zoom babies. I don't know if I could do it. If we look back to Hannah, which was really early on, she was a Zoom baby.
Right.
And I love that you're on here to talk about this, because I need to learn a little bit more. The people who got sober just on Zoom originally, it baffles the mind to me that you're able to do that. I have so much respect for the Zoom babies.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is, if you hit your rock bottom, regardless, you gotta find a way to make it work if you're willing to give it your all, and that's just kind of what happened to me. The way things ended up for me, I didn't have any other choice if I was gonna, live, a healthy and prosperous life, that, I had to make a change, and nothing I was doing was working.
Peter, when did you get sober?
I got sober in December 3rd of 2020.
Okay.
So just over 2 years.
Yeah, just over 2 years. Leading up to that, I had some pretty significant struggles with alcohol. I've always been, or at least I thought in my own head, I was always the guy that could, drink responsibly, but at the same time, I always, thought deep down I might have had a little problem, but, a drink or two would kind of curb me thinking about that, and I could just move on. But, I started drinking. I'll never forget the first time I got drunk. I was actually really young. I was 11 years old. And I was with two of my buddies, and his dad was he was a fisherman, and he would always dock his boat up when he'd get back from Alaska, and they would have cases and cases of booze. And so one night, me and my friends were hanging out on his fishing boat, and we got into his cases of Jack Daniels, and that was my first experience with it. And I'll never forget it. The second that whiskey hit my lips and burned my throat, I wanted in.
Mine was Four Roses.
Oh, God.
The good stuff.
Yeah, the good stuff.
Do they even make something like that, Four Roses? I've never heard of that.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. It was the old man, he used to have his pint of Fleischmann's whiskey in the rafters down in his workshop. So I always saw him doing that. I'd be down in the shop with him. He'd take out the bottle and take a little nip off of it and put it back up in the rafters. So he must have learned that from his father, and when it came time for, I wanted to experiment, the only thing I could think of was Fleischmann's whiskey, because I had no idea what alcohol was about. And right from the get-go, I was afraid I was going to run out. And that's when I found the Four Roses. There was a handle in the hutch upstairs. It was for family when they came over, but it was the real good stuff.
Yeah.
Probably $1 a handle back then. But it did the trick.
Yeah. So I've always been a whiskey drinker. That was always my go-to. But along the way, anything that did its job, I was open and willing. And so, throughout high school, me and my friends were the partiers. We were drinking every weekend, and that just became a part of who we were, and it was kind of embedded in us. And I took that into my adulthood. And in 2004, I played basketball, and I played in high school, and I dabbled in college up until this moment I'm about to tell you guys about. I went up for a dunk, and this guy undercut me, and I fell from the rim to the ground, and I fell on my leg and my ankle, and I ended up breaking my ankle and my what was it, your tibia?
Yeah.
One of the
Tibia.
two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, that was pretty painful. I had to have surgery and all that stuff. And this was when doctors were handing out OxyContin, like they were, like it was candy.
Sure.
And so I before then I never took a pain pill in my life, and they were just handing them to me, and I developed an addiction to opioids.
Very easy to do. I got Vicodin when I had my knee surgery, and the only thing that kept me is knowing that I'm going to get addicted. This will be very difficult to withdraw. I'll have to stop. I stopped for all the wrong reasons. It's like, this is going to be too difficult to get off of, so I better not do it. But man, I loved Vicodin. Those pills are unbelievable.
Aren't they? You know, and just talking about them just gives me a rush. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah. And I used to, after I'd playing games and when I finally rehabbed myself back to normal, or working out at the gym and stuff, I'd take a couple of those after a workout, and it was unlike anything else, man. So that kind of took me down a rabbit hole where I was addicted to that, and still a big drinker. And it got to the point in my life where I was pretty desperate, where I wasn't necessarily homeless, but I was living out of an apartment. I wasn't paying rent. Parents, thankfully, God bless their hearts. They got me into a methadone clinic, and I was able to quit doing pain pills and stuff. But at that point, I was now taking methadone, and so I was on that for, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years while I was trying to get my life back together. And then because I didn't have pain pills, drinking really took off. And I met my wife at that point in time, and I hid it from her. But after we got married, and when we started having our first child, was when my drinking career really took off. Got to the point where I was drinking, about a fifth a day for a couple of years, and I was able to kind of control it. And then after we had our second child, it got even worse. I was drinking 2 fifths a day for about 3 or 4 years. And it got to the point where my health became so bad and so severe, like my eyes and my blood pressure, my eyes were hemorrhaging because my blood pressure was so high. And I refused to go to the doctor or get any sort of treatment for it.
What made you not want to get treatment?
My ego. I just didn't want to admit my defeat yet. I still wasn't willing. I was willing to accept death before I was willing to get help.
Yeah, something you just said, Peter, is most of the people who are going to listen to this podcast is somebody at least thinking that they might have a problem. But what you just said is just the typical thing that I think we all understand. I was drinking 1/5 a day, and I was able to control it, right? Yeah. Normal people don't drink 1/5 a day, right? And anybody who drinks 1/5 a day would never say, I was able to control it. But that's a very normal feeling and thought process for us, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like, oh no, I was able to function, do everything, drinking 1/5 a day. It just shows you how insidious this disease is. It's like that we could actually say those words, and none of us even batted an eyelash, right? Because we get it. Yeah, we get it.
Mine was, I wasn't that bad.
Right.
I'm not that bad. I just drink beer. I only have tequila once in a while,
Right.
But, one beer for me was 1 6-pack or 1 12-pack, or, the weekends it was cases, but I was fine. There was nothing wrong with me. I didn't have a problem.
But and I love it. And same thing happened to me. I started going through some health problems, and I avoided doctors, and all these red flags went up for me for a couple years before I was able to really, same thing. And for me, it wasn't an admitted of defeat. It was other people coming and telling me that I had a problem. Yeah, right.
That's when you start to isolate a little bit more, because you don't want to hear that.
I agree.
My wife and I started having problems, obviously. And I always thought she was the bad guy, just, kind of blaming her, let me live. I just want to be left alone with my booze. And, that's what makes me happy. But, in my sick and twisted mind back then too, it's like, I wasn't drinking to get drunk. So therefore I didn't think I had much of a problem. But at the same time, I was drinking to maintain, because my body was in need of alcohol in order to function. So it got to the point where, I had extremely bad sleep apnea, where my wife, God, it kills me just saying this, where she would lay in bed while I was sleeping, and she would literally, like, she'd be watching me, and I would go like a minute or like 90 seconds, between breaths. And, she'll tell me this firsthand to this day. She's like, I thought I was watching you die. But my sleep apnea was so bad, when I'd wake up in the morning, like I would have this like the back of my throat would be glued together, and so I would throw up every morning. The first thing I did before I could even like get up and get out of bed, normal people take a shower, they brush their teeth. I'm sitting there, dry heaving over the toilet for the first half an hour of my day, and then when that was done, I was shaking so bad, I would have to put a half a fifth in me just to even out. And that's when everything started going downhill. So I agreed at one point to take a break from work and check myself into treatment. And that's when the scary part of my story happened. So I checked into treatment, and before I went into treatment, I drank a handle and a fifth of Jack Daniels. And I got into treatment. They were checking me in. You're supposed to show up like 24 hours drug or alcohol free. That obviously wasn't the case for me. I blew a .43 when I got to treatment.
Whoa.
And so they didn't turn me away. So I don't remember any of this for obvious reasons. But I went into detox, and I was there for about a day, and I don't remember any of this. But apparently I had DTs so bad I was like walking around detox, and I thought there was like a petting zoo inside detox, and I was like hallucinating. and petting animals that weren't there, and talking to people, the stuff you see like a crackhead on the corner doing. Apparently I was doing in detox. And so my blood pressure got so high that I started it wasn't a seizure. I forgot what they referred to it as, but they rushed me to the hospital. They put me in a medically induced coma just to get my blood pressure to subside. And I didn't.
They probably were afraid you're going to have a stroke.
Yeah, they were.
If the blood pressure went up that high.
Yeah, yes, correct. And so they induced me into a coma, and then I didn't come out of it for almost 3 weeks.
Wow.
So,
that's a wake up call.
What's that? Yeah. Well, yeah, to say the least. So I was in a coma for almost 3 weeks. My wife had to go through the conversations with the doctors. They, obviously told her that, the chances are he's not going to come out of this. If he does come out of it, he's probably going to have wet brain, and your husband's most likely not going to come back. And so, while she thinks she's dealing with me going to treatment, which is hard enough, now all of a sudden she's dealing with, a staple in her household, like, he might not come home. And of course this is over, the holidays. And so, so she had to deal with that. And then just one random day, I just woke up, and, like, where the hell am I? What am I doing here? And I had a ventilator in me, and, respirator, all that shit. And so, I started freaking out when I came to. And so, the doctors kind of told me what happened. And I wasn't really myself for a good 4 to 5 days after that. I was kind of just adjusting to, what happened, and the fact that I do have my own thoughts now. Like, I'm laying in a hospital bed, just kind of going through what happened in my life over the last, 3 to 5 years. And so I had to go through extensive rehab to walk again. And then from there, I tried pulling a fast one on my wife, and I tried telling her I don't need to go to treatment. I'm fine now because I haven't drank in like 6 weeks.
That's good alcoholic thinking.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm fine. The problem's fixed. I just had to, get on my deathbed for a little while. We're good.
Yeah. Yeah, forget about that coma stuff. I'm good.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember a damn thing about it. Why should I worry about it?
No, what's weird about being in the coma was I had a lot of dreams and stuff while I was obviously enabled or laying there. I thought a lot of what happened when I was in a coma was like reality. And
right.
So when I first came out of that, and I was having conversations with like my parents or my wife, I was saying stuff. They thought I was like, something was wrong with me. And I was like saying stuff that I thought occurred. Like, I thought my wife divorced me and she moved on, when that wasn't the case. And I'm telling her she did that over the phone. And she's just like, you're delusional. You're making all this up. And so it was hard to decipher 3 weeks of my own thoughts laying there in a hospital bed in a coma versus what really happened.
Yeah. Must have been very confusing.
Long and the short of it is, when I got out of the hospital, I did go to treatment, and that's where my life changed for the good and changed for the long haul. And it was the second day I was in treatment. This man came in and spoke, and he had a similar lifestyle to mine, similar problems when he was drank, consumed about as much as I did, and he got sober, and he was sober for a very long period of time, 15 years. And I thought to myself, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And this man is now my sponsor. He became my sponsor. And I asked him, he comes into the treatment center and he devotes, 1 day a week to telling a story and kind of working with the patients and stuff. So the third week he came in, it was like asking my a girl you're really nervous about asking to prom in high school. I felt that way, asking a man.
I can relate.
Can't you?
Everybody uses that analogy.
Yeah, well, it's
It was
true.
actually
You're like-
harder.
you're like shaking. You're like, I feel
Yeah.
like I'm about, so he became my sponsor, and I had a bunch of questions because I didn't really know much about the fellowship or the 12 steps, and I was eager, and so I started asking him questions after he said, so I asked him, sorry, let me revert. I asked him if he would sponsor me, and his response to me was, we'll give it a test run. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, what are you going to do what I say? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. I'm not really sure. You haven't told me to do anything yet. So I started asking him after that, questions about like the 12 steps and stuff. He's like, don't ask me questions about that. He's like, just do what I say. And that's all I need you to do. And he was very stern and very, very forthcoming with that. And I just kind of I was taken aback, but I was like, I like this and I need this because everything I was doing wasn't working. I essentially almost met my own self-inflicted demise. And so I needed somebody else to tell me what to do. And from that day forward, I just kind of, it's almost like I've become a very spiritual person, and it's almost like somebody else was driving as far as the things I was doing, because I was really able to just let go and just roll with it, and just put my pride and my ego and everything that got me to where I was aside, and just listen to others.
I want to pause you just for a second here, because you talked a little bit about going into treatment and ended up being put in a medically induced coma. If you're still drinking and you're listening to this, or you're considering stopping drinking, this is where it's really important to bring in a doctor, because depending on the level of drinking that you were doing, withdrawal from alcohol could possibly kill you. It may not, depending on what you're doing, but if you're at a certain level, withdrawal from alcohol is potentially life-threatening, and that's why having some medical intervention is very important for exactly what you just went through, Peter. I will say that there is something about when you have that mindset of, I will do what you tell me to do just because I want to get sober. To me, that's the mindset. When I hear that from somebody new, I got a pretty good idea that they're on the road to success. Sometimes you just have to keep it simple of, yeah, I'm just going to follow everything you do, even if it's just call me at 3 p.m. every day. Like something that's a simple task, I will just do the simple task.
Yeah, and that's really what it was. Call me every day, and I want you to start every day responding to the daily reflection that I send you. And so we just kind of took it from there. Once I began my step work, it just completely changed my mindset and my perspective on life. This whole experience was so humbling for me, because a lot of guys that are middle aged like me, you kind of tend to lose yourself a little bit in the chaos, because you have so much going on in your life, like whether it's marriage or starting a family, or having a career, or just stuff that sucks up the bulk of your time. I was always the type that I put myself last, and I thought I was okay doing that because I was living off false pride. And then after all those years of just kind of neglecting myself, and then letting the drinking be my therapy, now you see what happens.
Yeah, that's the key there. Is I found when I stopped drinking, what became apparent to me was alcohol was my problem, but alcohol was also my solution. And it was the only solution I had. And so other things had to change. It wasn't just about stopping drinking. I had to change the way I interfaced with the world, because it was my only hope to stop drinking.
Yeah, one of the things you said there, Peter, is it's pretty obviously that you hit a bottom, which we all have to hit some type of bottom. Some are different. Obviously, yours was pretty low, right? It really was. I think anybody would say that's pretty low bottom. When you're in the hospital and in a coma for three weeks. But it took me a couple times in this program, and the second time I came in, I had a typical experience as you had with your sponsor, and that is, first of all, I knew that everything I had tried didn't work, including trying to do this program my own way. Like, that didn't work for me, because I ended up drinking again. And the only thing I decided to do was to do exactly what my sponsor told me, which wasn't something I was good at. I didn't like to do what other people told me to do. Like, that just wasn't how I was cut. I always wanted to fight that. But I just did exactly what my sponsor told me to do. And if it was read this, if it was do this, if it was write or whatever, and I just did it. And it was almost robotic for me. When I talk about going through those steps, it was almost robotic. It was like, okay, this is what I need to do. Didn't even think of like why I was doing it. Wasn't even worried about what I was going to get out of it. I just did it. And then slowly, really slowly, for me, it just started to turn around. It just started to turn around a little bit.
Right.
Sounds very familiar.
This program is, they talk about the spiritual awakening and spiritual experience, and you can have both. I mean, you can have that experience that's just overwhelming, the bright lights or just the feeling that comes over you, but you also have the educational variety. And for me, that's the most important one, because that's the journey that you're taking in order to learn about yourself and learn about sobriety and what it's all about. And you have to get to that point in your life that you're willing to do anything. You just don't want to hurt anymore. You just don't want to do this. And until you get to that part, you're going to half measure it. I mean, at least that's the case it was for me. Until I was fully vested, I only did what I was willing to do. I only put as much effort in as I wanted to, or because I was afraid, or I didn't want people to really know who I was. And there's a day that comes by in almost every alcoholic or drug addict's life that they have to make a decision between drinking or not. And that day happened for me, and that's the day that changed my life. Because I didn't want to feel that way again. And everybody that hits that bottom, and you can hit a bottom 2 or 3 times in recovery. You can have the bottom that gets you in the door. You can have the bottom that gets your ass working. And you can have the bottom that just changes your life forever.
I couldn't agree with you more, John. And I'm a firm believer now that I had to go through what I did to get
right
where I am, because I wasn't going to learn any other way.
Yeah, we all on our own paths. I mean, it's my journey is different than your journey. It was different than Steve's journey, different from Matt's journey. It's different from everybody else's journey, but it's the journey I had to go through in order to get to where I needed to be, in order for me to recover. We're all on the same path, but we've taken different routes and different spurs and everything around to get to that same destination of clean and sober. But we have to follow our own path. We have these guides that are with us, our sponsors, our people, our close network in the program. The guys that we come to know and that we can trust. We pick up the phone and we talk to people. The guys you hang out with. Those are all people that are out there on the same road that we are, just trying to help each other. And they keep us on the path. Whatever path you're on, they just help us to keep there. It's so important. The fellowship aspect of the program is just as important as going through the steps and finding out who I am and what do I need to do.
And that's why I'm a firm believer in the fellowship and the bonds that are created as well, because you come from all different walks of life, but you have the same common goal, and that common goal is a big one. And you start off your relationships very, very genuinely. And there's no judging. There's no, there's it's just you and me and our story. And so, to be able to, I have, we have our home groups, the Knuckleheads, we meet every Thursday, and those guys have become like my blood. And it's so nice to have people that you can call upon, when you're having a good day, bad day, you're happy, you're sad, and not have to hold back because they might judge you in a certain way because you're going through what you're going through. And that's something I've never had. My relationships up to this date have always been based off of what can you do for me. And if, a lot of people in my circle outside of the fellowship would judge me because of what I went through. And they would look down on me because I did have a problem, an addiction issue. And it sucks that the world has to be that way.
I find that when people call me, I get as much help, if not more, than if I called you. And the reason for that is when you're telling me your character defects, that this is pissing me off, I'm having this problem, it's a reminder to me that I have those same issues. I'm hearing from somebody else, and I hear it in such a way of, oh crap, I'm hearing this from somebody else, better do my own inventory there. These are things I could fall into. And when I call somebody, I know that they have dealt, especially if it's somebody who's got good sobriety, long time in the program, they've dealt with the same stuff. And that's the attitude I go in when I have a problem. I had a problem this weekend and I called John, and going in, I was pissed off about something, but I know John's had these issues before. So there's no place of being judged there. And any feedback I'm going to get is not from somebody wanting to hurt me. It's from somebody wanting to help me. May I tell you something inconvenient, an inconvenient truth for you. I dealt with this. This is what you need to do. This is what's going to help you. And so at that point, you can choose to do what you want. But I think that's where a lot of the non-judgment comes through. Both people on the phone have gone through the same thing, and both people get something out of it positively.
One of the things that we talked about it earlier on, there's lots of sobriety out there in social media, podcasts, Instagrams, all those places today. And one of the things that the people who I interact, a lot of those people, today, if you're out there listening, we're talking a lot about 12-step programs because it's pretty obvious that the four of us on this podcast are 12-step people, and we talk about it all the time. But one of the things I tell people who may not be part of our fellowship, or maybe they dabble in it, is that you do have to find that fellowship. It may be different than the fellowship we have, right? But you have to find, I call it a community. You have to find your community, whatever that might be, so that you have those people. Just like you said, some of the best advice I got, nowadays I can't, I have my meeting, which is a Friday night men's meeting, right? Those are my guys, right? Those are the guys that I can call with any problem. Some of the advice I've gotten out of some of these guys is stuff that I did not want to hear. I tell the story in my sister, God rest her soul, died of lung cancer, but while she was having some treatment, she had some surgery, had part of her lung removed. She came up to stay with my wife and I. And long story short, it went bad very quickly, right? It went bad very quickly. She was with us for one day, and then she wanted to go home to her house, which was not a great situation. And I was pissed at her. Like, we had to open. My wife didn't want her to come over. Like, I was pissed at my sister, like how we opened up our house. And I went to a meeting, and one of my best friends in this program says to me, and I told him I was really pissed off, like, how could she do this? He goes, what are you going to do tomorrow? I said, what do you mean, what am I going to do tomorrow? He says, you're going to pick up the phone, and you're going to call your sister and see how she's doing. I'm like, fuck you, I ain't calling her up. I am not calling her up. I'm not doing that. And now I walk, and the next day, like, I wake up, and I'm like, God damn it, he's right. That's what I have to do. I have to pick up the phone and call my sister and see how she's doing. And, that's what I did, right? I just did that because I'm not sure I could have gotten that advice anywhere else. I mean that, right? That somebody just calls me on that. And again, he always tells me, read pages 62 and 63. Selfishness and self-centeredness, that we believe is the root of all of our problems, right? And I was being selfish and self-centered because my feelings were hurt. And instead of worrying about my sister who just had, 2/3 of one of her lungs removed.
Making it about you.
Right, making it about me, and how could she not appreciate my hospitality? And oh God,
and that's
you're one hell of a guy, Steve.
Yeah, a sad sack is what I am.
And, that's the beauty of step 6 and step 7. When you really kind of start to define your flaws and your character defects and your shortcomings.
Right.
Like, I drank to escape my problems, but with that being said, my problems are still my problems, and it goes to show that the booze doesn't do anything. And so I spent a lot of time on those 2 steps because once I got to that point, I was like, all right, we're going to tear down the entire house to its foundation, and we're going to start over. And so I was really honest with myself with my moral inventory, and I was really honest with myself about the flaws that I have that I need to deal with. And I had to go through some therapy when I first got out of treatment due to my issues in the hospital, and the therapy didn't do it for me. I couldn't relate, and I tried a couple, and I got more from the fellowship and meeting with my sponsor than I did any professional. And so him and I just had at it, and I would ask questions, and he would tell me, yes, no, you're stupid, you're an idiot. This is great. And he just kind of worked with me to kind of identify everything, and kind of figure out a way to push forward. And so that was something I'd never done in my entire life. My adult life, I never really dissected who I was and why I was the way I am. And, because of this experience and me having, this issue with drugs and alcohol, I got to start over and start fresh. And it's been a very, very, it's been a great feeling, when you get that relief. It's just, you almost feel like you're off to a fresh start.
Peter, I felt the same way. I felt as though I was given a gift in many ways. It's sad that I had to get to the point that I got, but I felt grateful that I finally have tools and something that can help me through any problem. I have a place to go. No matter where I am in the world, if I have a problem, I have a place to go. There's an AA meeting somewhere, and I can just drop in at any time. And that is a really freeing thing that normal people who don't have problems or don't have a drinking problem or addiction, they don't have that. They don't have a place to go when they're struggling with, what do I do with this? What do I do with my feelings? I am making a mess of things at home. We got a place to go, and we have people who genuinely will want to help us.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer that the world would be a better place if everybody was in AA or some sort of fellowship.
Yeah, I tried to tell my wife that too, but she didn't buy it.
That's her ego getting in the way.
Yeah, no, but I agree. I've always said it. I'm lucky. I did a lot of damage. By the time I got this program, really got it. Like, I was in this program when I was 38, but I didn't get it then. By the time I got it, I was 52. So there was a lot of damage. There was a lot of damage. There was a lot of damage done in those years, And but I'm so grateful that I found these rooms, just like Matt said, and I'm grateful. And the only reason why I find these rooms is because I was an alcoholic, right? So I'm grateful that I was an alcoholic, barring that, realized that I did a lot of damage during those years, because it just gave me this opportunity in this life to be something I could have never been on my own. I mean that honestly. Like, there is no way I could be the person I am today without this program and without the people that I've met in this program. It just wouldn't happen. I just wasn't built that way to do that. But this program has given me that opportunity to change it all, to change it all and become a totally different person.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you get to help others that went through the same
right.
thing you did, and
right.
So it's just so rewarding in that facet that you get to give back freely, and you want to do it.
I had the pleasure of going down and working with my son yesterday. He got an apartment, wanted to build some shelving for his stuff. And I went down there and I spent the day with him building some shelving in his basement. And, my son and I didn't have the greatest relationship, after all my drinking. One of the things I told about my story is that when I did my amends to my son and I talked to him about it, one of the things he told me, and I share this, and it's always painful to share it and talk about it, but I like to remember it, to remember where I was. But my son told me that one of his first memories of me was grabbing him by the shirt collar and pinning him against a hallway wall in our condo. Like that, as a 5-year-old, like that was his memory of his dad, right? Like that, like welcome to the world, And there was so much I missed out and so much I didn't do. So when I had that moment, like yesterday, we had this great time. Like we had this really, really nice time, and he has a 1-year-old, grandson, and like it's just a beautiful relationship that I don't have without this program. So I look at a day like that, and man, the gratitude I have for this program is immense.
Peter, I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience with Zoom AA. So you're one of these COVID babies. How did you find the right Zoom meeting? Is that like your basis for what the program is? What are you doing to integrate in person if you are? I'm just curious on how coming in, Zoom being your first experience, how that hit you.
Well, first off, I didn't know any better, and so you got to look at it from that perspective, where I played the cards I was dealt.
I think that's the perspective that interests me the most, that you don't know any different. So this is your baseline. As somebody who didn't go through that, I'm curious of not knowing any different and how it hit you.
It hit me well because when I was in treatment, we were still allowed, groups were able to come in and speak and do their part. And so I was able to, attach myself to my home group, actually, because, these guys came in and they spoke, they told their stories. And just like my sponsor, I walked out of treatment with a home group and a sponsor. Then there were other people that came in, and it was kind of funny. They would post their Zoom IDs on a whiteboard in the conference room, and so in my trusty little notebook, like the people that came in who I liked, I would just write down all the Zoom IDs and stuff, and then
that's an awesome idea.
Yeah, and so by the time I was done, I had the group and their Zoom ID and what time and what day their meetings were, and so I had like my whole calendar structured based off that by the time I got out. And so, I was really proactive in that approach, where I planned out what I was going to do because I knew I would get in trouble if I didn't. And so, this is where I stumbled across you guys and Mark's podcast. Is I also knew in my downtime I would have to fill my brain with thoughts on recovery. My sponsor said this to me, very bright and early. If you put as much energy into recovery as you did when you were in active addiction, then you'll be just fine. And so that stuck with me, and I just went with it. I'd go to like 2-3 meetings a day when I could. And I would listen to you guys, and I would listen to Mark's Recovered Cast, and slowly but surely, everything started coming together. I was able to meet obviously with my sponsor during those times, so I'd meet with him once or twice a week, in person too, and he would bring some guys over, and we'd have little meetings, or we'd read the big book and stuff in his garage. So I was able to experience that too.
That's fantastic. There's a lot that I think you're lucky about, but just hearing this, your mindset is what drove it. And I would imagine because you were doing the work, that's where your sponsor felt motivated to bring some people over. And just I'm just hearing a lot of you driving it based on your attitude, which is leading to you having success, which is the reverse feedback loop. You have the success, you get better, you put more work into it. Because you're putting more work into it, you're getting even better.
Yeah, but let me remind you what I said when I was getting ready to get discharged from the hospital. So that I don't need treatment. I'm better. So that's the weird sort of like gray area where I just feel like somebody else was just in the driver's seat, because by the time I left the hospital, went to treatment, and by the time I got out, I was just willing and able, man. I had just put everything that got me to where I was aside, like I said, and just went with it, because I knew I had to. I knew I had too much to live for at that point, and I knew that I was here for a reason, and I just needed to at least give it a shot.
I'm a firm believer in what you said, that the reason that we got sober, and there's still some free will in here, but the reason we get sober is we were selected to get sober. It is a nice cherry on the top that we live a sober life, but the reason for it is that we're here to spread the message to somebody else, that we were selected because we're going to be good helpers to help other people get sober. And it's a great byproduct that we live a sober life, but that's not why we were chosen. That's the only thing that seems to make sense to me, of much like what you're saying, there were these things that just seemed to be a higher power coming in, picking us up underneath the armpits and walking us to the place that we need to go, that we couldn't do ourselves.
So Peter, tell us a little bit about like the changes, like what's happening today that you're sure wouldn't have been happening if you didn't find sobriety and then do the work that you've done? Like, what are some of those, I just talked about me spending the day with my son. What are those things that are happening to you that say, this is why I got sober?
The first thing that comes to mind is obviously I'm a much better husband and I'm a much better father. I'm very more involved, from a hands-on perspective around the house, as far as, just being what I'm supposed to be, a husband and a father, just that. I'm very proactive in my kids' lives as far as their sports. I coach their sports. And I'm succeeding in my job a lot more. I've just seen, it's the little things, guys. Like, it's just, you wake up and you start your day, you're not hungover anymore. So you got that going for you.
Right.
Yeah. And you're just so much more in tune with your body and your mind. And that's a new experience for me too, because I never was, because I was always drunk or high, and so now I'm riding my true emotions and my true feelings, and it's almost like I'm just figuring out who I am. And I think that's something that most people take for granted, because it's exhilarating. Like I'm almost mind blown that I could never figure this out before all this occurred.
I agree. I know exactly what you're talking about there.
If you had I think I'm going to wrap it up here. I'd love to wrap up with this question. If you have some advice for somebody who's considering this path, that they think, maybe I have a problem, I don't know if I can do something about it, but I'm willing to do something. What would you give advice to get over that hump and why it's worth it?
I think you need to talk to somebody. And that's the hardest part is putting your pride and your ego aside and admitting you have a problem. But I mean, if you're listening to this and you're thinking you do have a problem or you may have a problem, let's be real, you have a problem. I think that, going to AA.org and using those resources to get in touch with people in your area. There's an app I use to find meetings, which is called, hold on, I'm finding it on my phone because I'm drawing a blank. It's just called the Meeting Guide.
Yeah. Meeting Finder.
Yeah, mine's the Meeting Guide. Which works great. You could be anywhere in the country and you could find a meeting no matter where you are. And you can't use the excuse that you can't physically go there because there's a lot of Zoom links to those meetings and stuff too.
Yeah, nowadays, right.
Right. So I would just suggest opening yourself up to talking to somebody that's been through it, because those are the people that can relate to you. You can relate to the most, and vice versa. And those are the people that are willing to help. And if I knew all of this existed, when I had my problem, I would, or, when I was in really, toward the tail end of my addiction, I would have probably reached out, but I didn't know it exists. Yeah. And so, our job is to continue spreading the word and spreading the message. So people may not necessarily have to go through what I did if there was a hand out there to guide them and help them.
Absolutely. I'm inspired by this conversation. I'm so glad you came on. I'm so glad I heard what you had to say. I hope it helps you listening to this. If it didn't, I don't really care, because it helped me tonight. I feel a lot better. Peter, I just love the energy that you brought in and the honesty. This was excellent to hear. It's exactly a great way to start the new year. Peter, thank you for doing this tonight.
Hey, man, no problem. Thanks again, guys, for all you do, and keep doing it, because there's a lot of people out here that appreciate you guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for that.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, John. And we will see you next week. Happy New Year, everybody.
You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.